Good afternoon, dear friends. We are happy to welcome you today at our regular meeting of the Media Forum of the International Club of National Unity together with STAS. The format is quite unusual today, and this is the first time we are working in this format. We have a wonderful guest who is the official representative of the Foreign Ministry, Maria Zakharova. And some of our participants are here in the studio, and other participants are online. They are from different countries worldwide. It is a complicated briefing. This is a familiar format for you, Maria. I'd like to introduce Larry Johnson, who is present today. All of you know him. He is an ex-analyst with the CIA. These were the days of the CIA where the grass was greener and CIA analysts were analysts, not propaganda men. And we have Pepe Escobar. We have learned that you cannot attribute him to any country. He is a pilgrim, a man of the world, a globetrotter. And given the fact that our friends have a tight time schedule, our friends overseas, I'd like to give the right to ask the first question to Justice Napolitano, who is a news analyst, the author of bestsellers. And if I may, I'd like to say a couple of words. First of all, I think that it is not a briefing, but a conversation like we had yesterday. Speaking about Mr. Escobar, it is of no relevance what he is doing. The important thing is his last name.
Yeah, the other one.
The only one.
Then let me hand over to you, Justice, your question, please.
Well, thank you, everyone. As we say in America, the gang is all here. Maria Zakharova, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. My dear friend George Galloway, a pleasure to be with you. Alexander Kazakov, thank you for inviting me. Pepe Escobar, you are a force of nature, anti-pilgrim. It's a pleasure to be with you. Larry Johnson is a longtime friend and collaborator. Thank you for allowing me to begin these questions. Maria, if you don't mind, I'm going to give you several questions so that you can, as we say in America, take the ball and run with it. In the alternative media this morning here in the West, there are reports that the United States and the Russian Federation have been negotiating without the public's awareness of it to seek a peaceful resolution of a special military operation. Can you tell us if that's been going on? Secondly, does the Kremlin understand that the Secretary of State of the United States, Marco Rubio, does not want peace and represents the neocon attitude of perpetual American and NATO war to weaken Russia? And thirdly, has any progress been made on the normalization of diplomatic relations so that the embassies can be filled, so that I can easily get a visa, and so that I can fly from New York to Moscow instead of having to go through Istanbul or Dubai? Thank you, Maria.
Да, давайте начнем с третьего вопроса. Сколько бы нас, я имею в виду наше посольство, наше генеральное консульство в Соединенных Штатах Америки не сокращали, а некоторые наши генконсульства, как вы знаете, даже закрывали, это никогда не мешало российским дипломатам выдавать визы так же оперативно, как мы это делали в расширенном составе. Когда мы в ответ сокращали американских дипломатов исключительно только как ответную меру на сокращение наших дипломатов, американские дипломаты, как правило, всегда ужесточали еще больше выдачу виз для россиян и говорили о том, что хотя, так сказать, мы не предписывали только консульским сотрудникам или вообще не предписывали консульским сотрудникам покидать территорию России в ответ на высылку российских дипломатов, но Соединенные Штаты Америки каждый раз говорили о том, что вне зависимости от того, меньше ли у них стало технического состава, меньше ли у них стало дипломатического состава, в любом случае они будут еще медленнее, еще сложнее выдавать визы россиянам. Как вы знаете, американцы получают российские визы just like this, или лучше сказать just like that, российские граждане для того, чтобы получить американскую визу, должны выезжать за рубеж и записываться в очереди на полгода, а то и больше, просто для того, чтобы пройти собеседование, что совершенно не означает, что визу они получат. Поэтому вы как получали оперативную визу, так и будете ее получать. Но это не только потому, что вы известный журналист, известный блогер, известный общественный деятель, так получают российскую визу все американцы и граждане других стран. Это наша, так сказать, это наша особенность. Мы никогда не отыгрываемся на людях, мы всегда с уважением относимся к социальной ответственности людей, потому что у многих семьи, у многих родственники за рубежом. Мы прекрасно понимаем, что людей нельзя наказывать, даже в ответ люди не должны страдать. Это могут быть вопросы здоровья, вопросы бизнеса, почему нет? Бизнес важен, тем более сейчас, когда во всем мире, очевидно, накапливается такой кризисный потенциал, и мы никогда не мстим людям за ошибки их режима. Поэтому с визами будет все хорошо. Что касается, как вам будет летаться, или как вы будете летать, с этим вопросом это, конечно, точно к Соединенным Штатам Америки, потому что мы такое предложение сделали о возобновлении прямого авиасообщения, которое, напомню, занимало 9 часов полета из Москвы в Нью-Йорк или Вашингтон, никакого ответа нет до сих пор. Это, опять же, не к нам вопрос, и прогресса здесь нету по причине, связанной не с нами. Эти вопросы задавайте, пожалуйста, в Госдеп. Теперь переходим ко второму вопросу относительно Госдепа, госсекретаря Соединенных Штатов Америки. Вы мне задали вопрос, правда ли, что Марк Рубио, госсекретарь США, против мирных переговоров, против мирного регулирования, что он за, как вы сформулируете, войну или продолжение боевых действий и так далее. Мне кажется, здесь надо тогда вопрос формулировать другим образом. Насколько я понимаю, и насколько понимает весь мир, Марк Рубио заявил о себе как о христианине, причем яром стороннике Иисуса Христа. Марк Рубио заявил о том, что он не просто адепт какой-то секты, которая является ответвлением христианского учения, что он является ярым представителем традиционной христианской религии. Я не помню, честно говоря, кто из ярых сторонников верующих в Иисуса Христа может быть адептом войны и может отказаться от использования любого шанса, который ведет к мирному регулированию. Люди, которые, а я помню, он выходил даже с крестом на лбу после какого-то традиционного обряда, традиционного для христиан,
Christian ritual. He professes Christianity as religion. He was not shy. He was proud of it and was proudly displaying the cross. I do not remember anyone who has been so open, declaring his faith. He does not only feel shy, but he is declaring his commitment to Christianity. If those people do not belong to countries where religion is strongly connected to the government, where if it is not where we have a religious state. So as a Christian, how come that he is against peace? I think that this question needs to be raised, but you need to revise your question. Instead of asking whether he's in favor or against peace, but you need to ask how his existential worldview is compatible with his stance on Ukraine. If he were someone who prayed at home, who went to church on Sundays, that would be different. I would not highlight this, but he is a person who has made his religion part of his political career. If it is indeed so, if he positioned himself to American citizens, if this was his way to promote himself and go up the career ladder, then it has to be he has to be consistent. We cannot have any contradiction here. In addition to everything else, I'm not going to drill into detail, but I can tell you that in the course of negotiations, it would not be ethical for me when those negotiations were held. You heard about them, but I'm not going to specify the date of those negotiations or the level of representation. But I can assure you that these were official negotiations well known to mass media. But in the course of one of such negotiations, the Russian side described in detail to the President of the United States by his State Secretary to put it across to Washington the persecutions that Christians in Ukraine are suffering and atrocities committed by the Zelensky regime against the most numerous religious group in Ukraine. Orthodox Christianity is the religion that has the majority of followers. It has never been a sect. It is a traditional Orthodox Christian religion. And we communicated that message, and we saw interest displayed by the American delegation towards the details. And this has to be something that has to encourage the U.S. State Secretary to look for a peaceful settlement rather than to continue the hostilities or even stimulate military activities. Given that this is the position of the U.S. State Secretary, then this question has to be addressed to him or his official representative. But I think that you need to ask him in person. And going to your first question, yes, indeed, there were several articles published these days, and there were plans of a peace deal described. Some people were talking about particular items on the agenda. Other articles spoke about the general framework, but I can tell you that no one has ever told us about it from the State Secretary, and we have not held any discussions of those plans. And our communication channel with the State Department is official, and we have not received any information regarding such negotiations or talks or discussions. None whatsoever. We've received no data or information about that. Thank you very much. And in particular, we thank you for highlighting the fate of the Orthodox Church in Ukraine. As far as I know, there will be representatives of the Orthodox, Russian Orthodox and Serbian Orthodox Church received in Washington, D.C. at the White House. Hopefully. Let's hope that they will receive the representatives of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, but not those who are trying to destroy it. You know, there is a difference. Actually, I have not seen the list of those people who are supposed to attend. If it is the so-called Orthodox Church of Ukraine, in inverted commas, that was set up by Zelensky at Bankovo, we can imagine what they're going to talk about. They will not talk about destroying churches, and they will not talk about killing believers, and they will not talk about their schismatic church and those who those preachers, those priests who are currently imprisoned needs to be heard. We need to listen to the relatives of those clergymen who were physically destroyed, who were killed, and we need to listen to the witnesses when churches and cathedrals were robbed and burglarized. It would the American audience needs to learn about it. Just imagine that Kiev, the official Kiev, has created a whole working group, an institution to study the chemical and biological composition of sacred remnants. I hope that our American audience knows what I'm talking about, and I know how the United States was established. And when we think about those sacred relics, well, there is no such scale of worshipping the relics, and actually there is more representation of various sacred objects and relics on the European continent, and this is a very widespread part of our Orthodox religious rituals, and Catholics do the same. Yes, I'd like to make sure, and I'm not sure that our American audience would understand me properly, because of the reason that there is no such scale of worshipping relics. I know that relics are sometimes brought to the United States, but this is a particular part of Orthodox Christianity when you worship relics of saints. And we know that during the Civil War and the Revolution of 1917, the biggest tragedy of our country was desecration of sacred relics, when relics were taken out of their coffins and experimented with. And the most extraordinary and unbelievable thing is that on the one hand, the Ukrainian regime announced decommunization of Ukraine, which means that they are rejecting the communist legacy. But at the same time, their actions against the Orthodox Church are acts that were never committed during the Soviet times. So they took the worst practices applied by communists, the worst acts, because any movement has the worst practices and proper practices. So they borrowed the worst practices applied by communists, not only abandoning religion, but desecration and actually humiliation of religious feelings. So he took the worst practices and he elevated them to the government level. If there is such a meeting at the White House, this would be good to talk about. As far as I understand, there will be the Russian Orthodox Church, the Serbian Orthodox Church representatives, and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church representatives.
Let me emphasize that while this is going to an American audience, it's actually going worldwide. And one of those global characters, a man who is renowned not just in Great Britain, but around the world, George Galloway. George has been a crusader for freedom, for rights, and been very speaking up at actual personal cost on behalf of Russia. So, George, your questions for Maria.
Honorable Lady Maria Zakharova, Honorable Gentleman and friend Larry Johnson, Right Honorable and learned gentleman Justice Napolitano, and dear friend of mine, all participants, thank you for the opportunity to address you, to ask a question of the most skilled representative of any foreign ministry anywhere in the world right now by universal acclaim,
Amen.
even if most of them will not acclaim it publicly. Madame, I am the presenter, host of the mother of all talk shows, which has just passed its 500th edition and now has an audience of millions every week. So there is evidence that not everybody in Britain is or shares the visceral hostility towards Russia evinced by successive British governments. And my number one of two questions to you would be this. To what do you attribute the ancient and rather special hatred of the British ruling class towards Russia? I can personally testify that it predated President Putin. I can't personally, but historically know that it predated the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. It seems to be something in the genes, in the genetics of the British ruling class. My second question would be this.
May I
ask you first question because it was pretty long, and maybe I will answer your additional question later on. Can I answer your first question so that I do not forget details of the question?
Of course, madam.
Regarding, as you've said, someone may not acclaim me as an experienced representative of foreign ministry. Well, they do acknowledge it. I've been sanctioned for 4 years. If they did not acknowledge it, they would never impose sanctions on me. And moreover, I'd like to share, maybe you're not aware of it, I've been 4 years under sanctions. And it is not a slip of the tongue, because the sanctions were imposed on me before the launch of the special military operation. I was the first Russian diplomat, and even the first diplomat compared to the Soviet Union diplomats who was sanctioned. It is unprecedented. We've never had a Russian diplomat sanctioned by any state. Mr. Antonov, who was the ex-ambassador to the United States, he was sanctioned, but not as an ambassador, but as Deputy Minister of Defense. And when he went to the United States, the sanctions were released and lifted. The sanctions against me were imposed by the NATO countries for the first time in the history of our diplomacy. And secondly, they were imposed before the special military operation was started. And thirdly, you might be surprised, the wording that they used when they imposed the sanctions was as follows. Assistance to deployment of Russian troops in Ukraine. If I could deploy troops, you know, I have a couple of locations where I would like, where I would perhaps deploy. It is a joke, of course. It had no reference to me, and I'd like to reiterate it. The first information that was received, that sanctions were that they were developing sanctions against me in the European Union, was received in November-December 2021. In January 2022, this information was confirmed, and before the 24th of February 2022, a few days before the troops, before Russian troops were in Ukraine, they adopted the sanctions that I was aiding and abetting deployment of Russian troops in Ukraine. You can imagine that they wanted to do everything to keep made me silent so that nobody could hear me. And by quoting me, they always made this comment that I am a sanctioned person. It is an important addition to the overall picture. Speaking about Great Britain, it will be a gradual transition to the UK. It will not be a dramatic move. Actually, they stopped issuing British visas to me a long time ago, before 2022. I remember that it was approximately in 2018 or 2019 when I received an invitation to address the British Parliament. There was a committee meeting to discuss the entire spectrum of issues, including the situation in Ukraine, because it had been unfolding for a few years and it happened after 2014. When I received that invitation, I decided that perhaps I should take part, but that invitation was withdrawn under pressure from Boris Johnson, who was the foreign minister. He did everything he could to withdraw that invitation. And when we submitted our passports to take part in an international information forum in the United States, our visas were denied. You know, you can see that that sanction story was kind of disguised, but they were doing such things against me. Speaking about hatred and the hatred that existed long before President Putin and before the October Revolution of 1917, I would take a different look at the situation. The things that are going on now and the things that took place more than 100 years ago and that were related not only to the revolution in this country, but related to the intervention. And prior to that, it was a derivative hatred. We need to take into account that the British establishment hated Russia not because of certain events, but the hatred was born and determined certain actions with respect to our country. And when did it start? I can tell you, I cannot say that it is our historiography, but our diplomatic rhetoric starts the countdown no later than the days of Ivan the Terrible. Every child here knows that a quote from a written source that is attributed to Ivan the Great, who wrote that the English woman is doing harmful things. You know, it was Ivan the Great who stated that open and that huge hatred of the British monarchy towards our country. We can recollect why. I can remind you of the intervention that began after the Great October Revolution, and it was directly linked to the UK. And the things that British troops, British intervention did in the north and in the northwest of our country were very similar to what is called genocide. They were concentration camps. They were mass murders and executions when people were gunned down. Very few people recollect those days, but we know that very well. And if we look at our regions, the city of Murmansk and the city of Arkhangelsk, those northern regions remember those events very well because people know the truth there and they know our history. Why? And this is a very multifaceted issue. I think I can give the following answer. It was not I did not understand the answer to this question immediately, because it is not closely related to the United Kingdom, but it is related to our planet and civilization. I used to believe that hatred, when someone feels hatred towards someone, when there is a group of people hating someone, when hatred is a government policy or the policy of a social group, I was not aware that hatred could be organic and could be treated as something normal, when a group of people could be normal beings, human beings, but could feel hatred towards something or somebody. In actual fact, I can tell you that it is not so. Once someone starts, whether it is an individual or a group of people or a government, and they begin to feel hatred, we need to say that it is something abnormal. It is a sign of abnormality. When I was in the US and worked there, and when I was driving to the office, one of a radio hosts, it was a radio, I did not see the host, I checked him online. I think it was an Afro-American host, and he even wrote a book, and he talked about his book, and he said that quite often people were using objective hate as a concept. Yes, indeed, there is objective hatred, but in Russian it is called anger. And when Soviet people hated Hitler and fascism, we described it not as hatred, but as anger. We have a song, and that song reads that it was a noble anger, a noble fury, better to say, a fury when you do not accept a particular phenomenon, and it was objective. We did hate, and we continue to hate absolute evil, but at the same time, we do not reject the idea of non-acceptance of hatred. For the British community, hatred is an organic state. They actually promote hatred since childhood, and it is a norm for them. I can give you an example. Such a concept as license to kill was discovered by the Brits, and it was well described by Fleming, and it was actually, if you remember James Bond movies, it was also acclaimed there. I believe that James Bond was popular worldwide, like in our country, because we did not understand the essence. What is a license to kill? James Bond is a British Special Service agent and who served Her Majesty. He was destroying the enemies of Her Majesty, of British monarchy, without discrimination, whether those people were right or wrong. He had to exterminate them, and he received a license. It was a kind of an indulgence, giving the right to kill based on the hatred displayed by the British monarchy. Those people who were defined as the enemies of the British monarchy. And we remember what happened in South Africa and elsewhere. The foes, the enemies of the British Empire were ordinary people quite frequently. I gave you an example of the intervention in the early 20th century. There was an indulgence and a license to kill lots of civilians, and they were peaceful citizens. And I'd like to highlight that the notion, the concept of a concentration camp was something that was created by the British elite circles. They were the first to put it into practice. Therefore, the concept of hatred is not something which is a response to actions committed by Russia, but it is their philosophy that is embedded in their government, and it is a sign of abnormality. I'm not talking about ordinary British people. They are not aware of it. They are poorly educated. There are lots of problems in the education system, and they have no idea about Russia. They know nothing about Russians. citizens of Russia. They are consumers of information provided by British tabloids. Their view of the world is through the prism of British and to some extent American tabloids, yellow newspapers, and those tabloids are like blinders. And of course, that hatred is not a characteristic feature of British people or English people. It is a trait that is passed from generation to generation, and this is something that is embedded in the scriptures of the special services or government bodies. There is the answer to the question why. We can look metaphorically, philosophically, metaphysically. One of the explanations is that it is their defect, it is their shortcoming. This is the kind of defect, and unless you start fighting with this defect that is displayed as hatred towards something or someone, this will continue to exist. But there is a practical side to that. British people are very pragmatic. They do not only hate, but they cannot tolerate. This is very important. They cannot accept and tolerate why Russia historically possesses something that they do not have. They do not have oil, we do. They do not have gas, we have gas in Russia. They do not have mineral resources, natural resources. We have the entire Mendeleev table, and we have Mendeleev. They do not have space exploration whatsoever. We do. But if we take oil, gas, forests and rivers, seas, and all natural resources, they were given by God Almighty and by nature. We were exploring the outer space with God's help, of course, but by ourselves. Our government, instead of hating other people and instead of actually preaching hatred, they focused on developing our own people and helped other people to develop. And this is why we succeeded in exploring outer space. We kept launching rockets, and we're doing that. We actually took the first pictures of the other side of the moon. We did a lot of things in the outer space, and they, being a nuclear state and being a permanent UN member and being the global financial center, did not condescend to build a proper outer space program, which testifies to the fact that they're not a great power, but they are legalized pirates, basically. I'd like to remind you that legalization of pirates was their discovery. There is no country in the world to legalize pirating. We, as a country that suffers from terrorism in the North Caucasus in the 1990s, and many countries negotiate with those who would like to stop being a terrorist or a bandit, but at the same time they used to commit crimes in the past, but they would like to abandon that. But Great Britain did a different thing. They actually made those illegal criminal organizations serve them. I have used the example of pirates, but we can give other examples, but let's not focus on that. Sorry for this long-winded response, but it deals with very complicated, in-depth processes that are underway, and it is very interesting. They do not only want to take the resources that we own, and they cannot accept the fact that we possess those resources. And this lack of tolerance, this lack of meekness, this impossibility to be meek leads to hatred. You know, this is why we do have such resources, because historically we have never elevated hatred to the level of government policy. We've never looked at people as category 1 or category 2. And we've never looked at human humankind and split them into groups with one group having the right and entitlement to have all the benefits and others as their servants. But this ideology is part of their government policy and it is fixed as a norm. They never actually rejected it. And you know, monarchy in the modern world, though Biden said that if there is democracy, there is no democracy. He is an amazing person. He is like a broken watch that shows the right time twice a day. I cannot but agree with Biden that the UK can serve as an example because their monarchy runs contrary to the democratic principles. When monarchy is preserved in a particular country, based on our knowledge of history and observation, when monarchy is preserved like an institution to hand over the best traditions, the best civilization achievements from generation to generation, this is the main goal of the monarchy. This is why the monarchy possesses so many assets. It has to be a guarantor to guarantee preservation of that in the society. Look at the British monarchy. I'm sorry to say that, but some representatives of the court, those people who lived in modern days, they are, you know, perverts. Some of them are perverts. You know, they are, they have all of the. Actually, we can provide evidence because of their behavior. They were involved in scandals, in pedophilia scandals. Who is a pedophile? He is a pervert. He is ready to destroy the life of a child to meet his own, to actually appease himself. And we see that black sheep in the British monarchy, they are involved in, adulterous acts, and they keep farting into a bottle. And this is something that is their business, like something like their business card. They they make movies and produce movies about that. They write memoirs about that. I've never read any memoirs where they shared how they collected some rarities and then donated those collections to some countries. For example, they could collect some rare pieces of art, works of art that were actually taken by their predecessors and stolen by their predecessors, and they could return them to, for example, Indian people or other countries. I've never read about that in memoirs. They keep robbing and putting all those things in their treasuries. All memoirs, all movies, all TV programs, all publications are about dirt. All their servants, all their all those who served them, who were children's governors, they keep recollecting entering a bedroom and seeing multiple people on a single bed. I've never seen anything shared, anything good shared. All their humanitarian projects are related to business. It is a kind of business franchising. It is not sincere. And then it turns out that it was another plot or another attempt to scamming attempt. And I'll finish my response to your question, but maybe it is a genetic disruption in the political system. I have to apologize because the people present here would like to hand over to Rachel Blevis because she is pressed for time. Friends, I hope you're not against that. Rachel, over to you. What is your question?
Thanks, Danny, for hanging on.
Thank you so much for your time today. Just quickly, I wanted to ask about the state of the propaganda war, because I'm here in the United States, and one thing that we notice here is that when it comes to the mainstream media and their coverage of what's happening on the battlefield in Ukraine, it is very, very different than what we're hearing from Russia. And anytime you get an update from Russian officials, especially in recent weeks, when they've talked about the situation on the battlefield and the over 10,000 Ukrainian forces that were surrounded, then here in the West, they just negate that and say, oh, that's not the truth. They don't provide any evidence, but they just say, oh, Russia's lying, and that's all that they think that the Western people need to know about it. What are your concerns about the propaganda war, and do you think that it is still having an influence on overall relations between Russia and the U.S.?
Еще раз, какая...
Расхождение в данных и в мейнстримовских дают именно украинскую позицию. Является для нас это проблемой?
It is a worldwide problem. This is the post-truth world. These are fakes, but at the global level. As to the extent, there are many people asking these questions, and ordinary people, rank-and-file people, keep asking this question and saying, how come people cannot lie like that? It is actually something unimaginable, unbelievable, when someone is the president of Ukraine, the minister of defense, the officer who is in charge of human rights. Is it possible that they lie so blatantly? I'd like to remind you that the word propaganda in the professional community and among educated people is associated with the name of Goebbels. He was the propaganda minister in Nazi Germany. He was Hitler's propagandist. Goebbels' propaganda, as it was discovered during the Nuremberg Tribunal. I am sure that the United States may not have that information, but tomorrow is the 20th of November, and we are going to mark the anniversary of the Nuremberg Tribunal against Nazi criminals. And you can see how differently information is circulated. The world began to develop to a great extent the humanitarian law, and the world started developing these concepts of genocide and started prohibiting aggression. It is the cornerstone of international law. It is the cornerstone of the United Nations. It is the cornerstone of our modern civilization. The Nuremberg Tribunal. Every kid knows about Nuremberg. Ask people in New York, Philadelphia, Washington, would anyone answer the question about this tribunal? No one. And I think that maximum you might hear about it, you might hear about a case initiated by a feminist against harassment. And the propaganda in Nazi Germany was so big that the whole of Germany elected Hitler democratically, despite his Nazist ideology, racist ideology, and it was based on disinformation. When they proclaimed that Gypsies, Jews, and Slavic nations were underdeveloped peoples, and they had no right to exist because genetically they were inferior compared to genuine, real Germans. Does it remind you of anything? And this reminds me of liberal propaganda. Liberals, global liberals actually built Zelensky. This agenda that a human being is born without having any gender, and it is only the society and education who will tell that child who he is, a male or female or someone else. And the same, so it is not about the Ukrainian story. The story around Ukraine is only an embodiment of the post-truth world. It is more large scale. I believe that this gender ideology and thinking up various genders and manipulations with genders, this story is much more global compared to manipulations around Ukraine. And by the way, these are two integral parts of one and the same thing. Look at the liberals inside the US. By imposing this gender craziness, they are expanding their electorate. So it has its practical application. The story around Ukraine was something that liberals needed to improve and enhance their electoral capabilities. You know, manipulating democracy while proclaiming democracy. It is not our problem. We in Russia know our history. We know facts that stem from history. And as we know, many countries, people in many countries, unfortunately, don't know their own history. You have a large audience tomorrow on the 20th of November. You can ask your audience what Nuremberg Tribunal was, so that they do not go to Wikipedia or other reference sources. And if there had been no tribunal in Nuremberg, we would be hearing stories that Hitler was not such a monster as some people are trying to say today. It is a global problem, and the situation around Ukraine is only a portion of the global problem of fakes. Please do not think that I'm trying to create this artificial link between today and the Second World War. The situation around Bucha is a clear copycat of the times during the Second World War. This is a town which was in 1942 in Germany. I think it was called Norddorf, and it was deoccupied by Soviet troops, and then the Soviet troops had to withdraw. And when Nazis entered that city again, they placed corpses, they placed dead bodies, and they accused Soviet troops, Neverdorf. Please, you can type in the name of that town. And by the way, Hitler's government announced establishment of an international tribunal, an international court, to actually hold a trial against criminals who killed civilians in that Neverdorf city. And you know who led the tribunal? Representatives from the Baltic states. And we are seeing that now, after decades, the representatives of Western Germany acknowledged that it was framed, it was a setup, it was a special campaign to actually badmouth the Soviet army. And this was the same happened in Bucha. The only goal was to undermine and disrupt the negotiations that were held in Istanbul between Russia and Ukraine. They knew that they would be able to force Zelensky to terminate the negotiations, but they needed an argument why they did it, why Zelensky had the moral right to stop negotiating. And they used Bucha, and using the Nazis example 80 years ago.
Let me just interject. Yeah, let me interject.
Actually repeated that.
With George Galloway, with Rachel Blevins, and with Danny Haifong, you have three voices, one in England, two in America, who speak out on behalf of Russia, trying to correct that record. And fortunately, each of them have literally millions of followers and pay attention. So I so appreciate your answer. And Rachel, so appreciate your question. Rachel's also spent some time in Russia in the past, so she's She has a particular love for the country. Danny Haifong also has a very wide audience, a global audience. Danny, go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Larry. Many thanks to the Honorable Spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, for providing this opportunity. Really great to be with you, and to mutual friends, Pepe Escobar, to you, Larry, for facilitating this, Judge Napolitano and George Galloway, Rachel Blevins. An honor to share this time with all of you. My question for you, Ms. Zakharova, is right now, there has just been a resolution, and this maybe can go into correcting the record of Russia's foreign policy and Russia's role in the world. There's a resolution in the UN Security Council on Gaza 2803, and people in the United States are expressing frustration, those who watch my program, for example, about the resolution itself, and are curious about Russia's position, the abstention, along with China. Talk about, if you can answer some of those frustrations about this resolution, about it going through, Russia's position with abstaining, and how it reflects and is consistent with Russia's foreign policy.
This is a very challenging question. I'd like to open this resolution so that I could quote some provisions of the resolution. I'd like to know that we gave a detailed answer, and it was Mr. Nebenze, our permanent representative with the United Nations, and there was a detailed response provided and commentary provided by the Ministry of Defense. I can tell you that indeed this was an American draft. We abstained, we did not vote for it, and what underlies that draft document that was prepared by Washington, there was this idea of the so-called Peace Council led by Trump, with participation of a number of respected global leaders, and that council in its term will be authorized to coordinate with Israel and Egypt to create international stabilization forces that will be entrusted to perform coercive functions to demilitarize the enclave, to disarm Hamas and to disarm other units. And at the same time, please note that the participation of Palestinian National Administration to manage the sector and to determine the future fate of Palestinians per se, on the basis of, it is very important to note, on the basis of a two-government model is not considered. What can we do about that? How can we go away from this fact? How can we wave it away? And like you are also looking at the text. Israel obligations are not recorded, including no annexation of Palestinian lands, withdrawal of its troops. Nothing of the kind is mentioned in the document. There is another very important point. The United Nations Security Council and the Secretariat of the United Nations, judging by the document, are left out of this equation in terms of control and reporting or responding to practical issues related to the deployment of an international contingent. Why do we have to engage the United Nations, the Security Council and the Secretariat if they're not going to control or inspect or take part in the discussion of these matters? And there was another provision that sounded like an ultimatum associated with the promotion of the US-made draft. Though everyone was ready to discuss, but there was no no normal fundamental discussion of the document, and principal comments provided by other member states were not considered. What kind of comments are we talking about? They were based on international law. They were made with reference to quotes to the resolutions of the Security Council and the General Assembly. There were references to the documents that were adopted by the international community in the legal field. If we look at this text again, there was no consideration made. Not consideration, but I should say that there was a moral and psychological pressure. I can describe it this way. When there was this motto that unless you adopt this document, it means that you are in favor of bloodshed. Our country was one of the countries that approached the Security Council and started working to make declarations to stop the bloodshed. So we cannot blame of being in favor of it. And I'd like to draw your attention that Russia has taken a very serious attitude to this effort. There was an alternative counter draft that was actually distributed to address the contradictions that emerged at the Security Council, and we insisted on going back to the internationally approved basis of with due regard to the interests of Palestine and Israel. We already acknowledged Palestine and recognized Palestine as a state. And to sum it up, the Resolution 2803, it does not give the needed prerogatives to the Security Council, and it contradicts the spirit of proper peacemaking, and it is not fulfilling the function that it is declaring. It does not take into account international legal decisions that were made by the international community and the steps made by the international community. And the Palestine state, the creation of that state, was something that was signed up by the global majority. No one wants to heed that. The global majority is reinstating and reinforcing something that was agreed practically 80 years ago when there was a decision made to create two states. 80 years have passed, and the global majority is reiterating that there must be two states. One state was created a long time ago and has been recognized by the majority of states, and the second state has not been recognized by everyone, but they have to develop and they have the right to exist on the basis of international law. Somehow it is not taken into consideration. Why did we abstain?
Don't open it on your laptop. I just remembered you're not going to have your microphone.
When when the vote was taken, we were relying and we were taken into account on our vision, but at the same time, we were taken into account the position of the Palestine national autonomy. And actually, we took that into account. And of course, we were taken into account the position of stakeholder Arab Muslim countries who supported the US document. Yes, indeed, no one wants any bloodshed, and it could be provoked by someone or something. And given the summary of these factors, we made the appropriate decision. I'd like to highlight the following. The Russian representatives have been highlighting it at every level. The bloodshed could have been stopped a long time ago. It is a well-acknowledged fact. But what had to be done? Perhaps it could happen if Washington methodically. And I'd like to say that it was 6 times, I'm checking the data, but it was 6 times when Washington failed to exercise its veto right against draft resolutions that required to stop violence. 6 times they vetoed those resolutions. They exercised the veto right. What is important? The important thing is for the resolution not to become some sort of a shield or some sort of a smoke curtain to hide uncontrolled activities in Palestine, on Palestine land, so that it is not a final judgment to divest Palestinians of their right to self-determination. And of course, we need to make sure, please hear me, that it should be in line with genuine interests of Israel's citizens. We keep hearing from many countries and politicians who claim that they're acting for the benefit and in the interests of Israel citizens, but those decisions were made in the interests of some people in Israel, not the whole nation.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that question, Danny.
Judging by how those who examine me are nodding their heads, I feel that I have given an excellent answer to this question. Well, in fact, I'd like to say the following. If there is a human measurement, human aspect here, the things that human dimension. When I looked at what was done to Palestinians, this is something that is not that one cannot describe. A normal human being cannot say that this was an adequate thing to do. I don't know what the final death toll in Gaza. I don't know how many people are dead. 100,000. It was above 80, north of 80,000 or 90,000, practically 100,000 civilians, people who never took any arms in their hands. They were killed consciously, intentionally. I don't know whether it's easier to kill people by torturing them or not torturing them, but what was evident, their torture, their sufferings were long-lasting, and there were certain forces who were deriving pleasure watching Palestinian citizens suffer. This is some of a waterline demarcation, line of demarcation. When I saw and heard how people were showing videos of not only wounded Palestinians, but Palestinians torn into parts, and were laughing and were saying, well, that's normal and it serves them well. This is the end. It is similar to the United Kingdom. It is something in their genetic program, some sort of a breakdown. It is like pedophilia. I think that such things cannot be eradicated, but they have to be treated medically. And an answer to the question if someone is a normal human being or not reads as follows: if in order to feel for a wounded child, you need to know what his or her nationality is. You need to feel that pain automatically. If you are not someone who is not sick, if you are well educated, if you are a human being who refers to civilization as a concept, you have to feel for those people automatically. You have to feel for that child who is in this dire situation without checking what the religion of that child, what the ethnic group, which which ethnic group he or she belongs to, who his parents are, which language the child speaks. That is the end, full stop. Once you need to clarify who is the child, what is his ethnic identity, is the child from this or that side, well, that's it. It means that we're not dealing with normal people. Maybe there will be other civilizations, or there were other civilizations, but in our civilization, the civilization we live in, it is a sign of absolute perversion, and it is the sign of a beast, if I may. I could not but make this clarification, because this story, this situation does not only have this dry legal aspect. You know, this situation has an aspect that relates to the fact that it's been 2 years when we were observing how people were dehumanized, when people were pointing figures at a TV screen and they were enjoying videos of a pregnant woman dying in labor, and they could not see their newborns because, you know, because of what? Well, we are pressed for time. Maria's time is running short. I am with you. It's okay.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and introduce.
And we have a new guest.
So
can we have Clayton online? By the way, I can see that there is some discrimination of our colleagues, because we have given the floor to those who are online, but we have not given the floor to those who are sitting next to us. Maybe we'll give the floor to Clayton
we need to deal with
Morris.
the ones who are online first, because Clayton Morris, he used to work with Fox News. He's actually good friends with Tucker Carlson. Clayton and his wife, they do a podcast called Redacted. I think the last is 3 million subscribers, Clayton, or more than that. But like George, like Danny, Clayton is an important voice speaking out independently. Clayton, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Larry. Appreciate it. And thanks, Maria. Thank you to everyone. Reports this week show that acting president of Ukraine is trying to buy fighter jets at an unprecedented rate. He's planning to do that with money that he doesn't have, of course. This, of course, comes on the heels of corruption scandal that unfolded a few weeks ago in Ukraine, where we've had hundreds of millions of dollars stolen from the United States as well as the European Union.
Sorry, the sound is broken. Could you please repeat your question?
Yeah, if you repeat it, Clayton, the sound is breaking up a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, my pleasure. New reports this week show that acting president of Ukraine, Zelensky, is trying to buy jets at an unprecedented rate. To have money that he doesn't have.
So he said the president
is not working.
Sorry, it doesn't work.
No, you're not able to hear me?
Yeah, it was.
Are you able to hear me at all?
Try it again, Clayton.
Right, so you guys can hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, you can hear me now? Okay. Sorry about that. New reports show that acting President Zelensky, Ukraine is trying to buy fighter jets and unprecedented rate. He's planning to do it with money.
Let him go ahead and finish speaking, and I'll translate it for you.
Okay. He's trying to buy all of these fighter jets, $140 billion euros that he's planning to buy. He's also just with fighter jets there, 150 of these most advanced fighter jets from Sweden being sent to
fighter
Ukraine.
jets that they own.
What is President Putin's response to this?
Know the story about the fighter jets.
Yeah.
You're talking about fighter jets that are worth 140 billion euros. I understand why the connectivity is being broken, because there is no need to discuss the fighter jets that were received by Zelensky. They will be destroyed.
Yeah.
There's no reason to ask that question. Firstly, he's not going to receive those fighter jets, and secondly, they will be destroyed. Everything that Zelensky is going to get for terrorist acts against our country is subject to destruction, full stop. And of course, I'll be happy to listen to your question, but you need to understand that for our country, this is not a question any longer. But if you ask that question, I'll be happy to answer your detailed question as well.
I just wanted to get to NATO again providing more advanced weapons into Ukraine. One is the Russian response to NATO for shipment of fighter jets. So they will be destroyed the moment they arrive in Ukraine.
Right. Yeah, they will be destroyed. They will be destroyed once they arrive in Ukraine.
Yes, do you understand why it is being done?
Yes,
I don't know. These are French fighter jets, right? You understand that there were precedents when it was declared that weapons would be delivered to Zelensky, and then those supplies were not made, and those weapons surfaced in other regions of the world, not in Ukraine, or there was not a full set of equipment. Why? Because it is business. This is the way how they continue to be inside a huge international corruption scheme, corruption ring. There was another corruption balloon that actually was exposed, and now we understand what the Kiev regime is. The whole world was aghast, and when they found out how they store money in boxes, and when they learned about the amounts, but the amounts are significantly high, and the ring, the corruption machine ring, is much more extensive, much bigger compared to those close to Zelensky and the members of the Ukrainian government. It is a whole conglomerate. It is a colossal international mafia structure that has several components. There is a component associated with money laundering. There is a component related to terrorism. There is a component associated with illegal weapon trade in illegal black markets, and there are other components, etc., etc. Naturally, of course, those who are engaged in supplying weapons to the Kiev regime are aware that those weapons will be destroyed, but they know that that equipment will never reach its destination. But they need money. They know that this is a billion-worth business deal, and this is why they are lobbying those deals. This is why they are pumping out money from taxpayer, because these are schemes. They understand that they can send weapons that are obsolete, or that will be something will be missing, because that weapon will be destroyed, and no one will no one will challenge the quality of that weapon, of that equipment, whether 5 tons were delivered or 4 tons. You may ask why I'm saying that. Because there are no mechanisms, no control mechanisms in place to monitor the deliveries. Neither the Ministry of Defense of France, nor Pentagon has that. I don't know. I don't know about the United States. That now it is not called Pentagon, but the Ministry of War, the Department of War, whatever. And neither the NATO, whatever the centers are called, there are no control bodies that are composed of auditors, representatives of public at large, or special services representatives to monitor and control those deliveries. Someone who would calculate and compare the original batch and the deliveries. But those mechanisms have to be in place. And they actually have to exist on both sides. And there are two accounting terms, debit and credit, and they have to coincide, they have to match. There needs a reconciliation. Mr. Smith, when he ships weapons from the UK to the Kiev regime, he has to call Mr. Johnson, who is at the receiving end representing the Kiev regime. And moreover, these commissions must be hybrid, mixed commissions, and these should be hybrid monitoring and auditing centers, because they have to control each other. And in fact, there is nothing in place, even something close to it. I remember a discussion that was ongoing in the United States when everyone was asking the question, how can we calculate how much we have already shipped? But how can you calculate? There's no information about shipments. You know, when a man or a woman is selling apples at a marketplace, there is actually an inventory of goods, and then they sell those apples and report on how many apples have been sold. But no one is controlling that, because it is a mafia structure. And I applaud to Mr. Orban, the president of Hungary, who called a spade a spade. It is mafia. It is a genuine, true mafia that is engaged in illegal, unlawful. In actual fact, that is called criminal money laundering through equipment, supplies, and battlefield fights. The more weapons are provided, the less control will be exercised. The more people die, the fewer witnesses will be. It is not a very difficult business. I think no one in the UK, I'm talking about ordinary people, in the UK, in the United States, in France, Italy or Spain, no one would have this idea that despite this well-developed legal community, despite the system of checks and balances, and despite democracy that they believed to be in place, that everyone would be kept silent, that they would gag everyone. How do they gag people? They give money to accomplices, or they just threaten people, they put people behind bars, and that's it. Actually, everyone is gagged in the world, in the West. And those people who speak up, they are the targets. And actually, the sniper looks at them through the sniper rifle, and they understand that they may end up being dead. There were lots of examples. How many journalists in the West were actually denounced? How many people were made to keep silent, including those people who had to escape from the West? And then American weapons end up in Mexico, weapons that were supplied to Ukraine, and it is already a recorded fact. I suggest, if Maria has some time left, I suggest that we hand over to Pepe Escobar and Larry Jones. Well, you know that given that we are gradually turning to Pepe, I cannot but talk about drugs. You know, today, every day, we see and we watch news from the US about the anti-drug trafficking war. They're saying that narco trafficking should be addressed, and for this purpose, they are sending boats to Latin American countries, and they are destroying some other boats, and they're saying that these activities will be more extensive and more intensive. And 3 weeks ago, I published some materials where I said that perhaps, well, I fully understand that plantations, we can call them this way, and production of drugs at such scale are not located in the United States. They are definitely outside the United States, but dealers are based in the US, and trafficking logistics is located in the US. But most importantly, there are lobbyists, those who legalize drugs. They are based in the US. If not for lobbyists who have been lobbying for the recent decades and who demanded legalization of drugs, there would be no need to increase the temperature of this fight against narco trafficking, and there would not be so much freedom enjoyed by drug dealers. Whom would they sell their drugs? They can produce as much as they want, but who would who would buy their drugs? Actually, legalization of drugs would lead to an exponential growth in production. They will be shipped and supplied. If before drugs could be bought in downtown Manhattan, now drugs can be bought in the north of Manhattan or in Central Park, where you like. I arrived in the US in 2005, and I was shocked that when we went to Little Italy at crossroads under bridges, there were people, American citizens, who were peddling drugs, and this was very close to policemen, and they were actually unbuttoning their coats, and they offered the full range of drugs. And I was astonished. How come that a country that is fighting against international narco trafficking, international cartels, cannot conquer drug trafficking in New York, in one of its central, in the heart of the United States? At least I perceive New York as the heart of the United States, and they believe that it is completely permissible. And today I see that the situation is much worse. These are not only local policemen who are working hand in glove with drug dealers, but this is a situation that has actually spread across the entire country, and this is something that is legal. There are discussions that drugs could be sold openly, and it is normal to have TV discussions of drugs that can be taken in case of depression. And actually, it is normal to say that drugs, narcotic drugs, are better than medicine. And we should not start with Maduro, but we should start with those who are with the Democratic Party, liberal, ultra-liberals, who have been doing everything possible to legalize consumption of drugs inside the US over the past decades. These are the people that have to be arrested. You do not need boats, you do not have fighter jets, you do not need a Navy to do that. You just need to arrest several lobbyists who are lobbying legalization of drugs and actually put them to trial. Well, sorry, but the things you are talking about are very common sense. This relates to the question of this post-truth world, because this is something that is obvious. This is something known to people who were brought understanding the difference between good and evil, and that drugs are evil, not because people do not have enough money to buy drugs, but drugs change people as compared to cigarettes, tobacco, and other things. They can turn a human being into a beast, into an animal in one go. But when we see whole parties that are promoting the spread of drugs as replacement therapy using international platforms, and I understand the United States in this respect, that they are actually standing on the brink of an abyss, and things that were happening in Philadelphia have been spread across the United States. These are ghettos, and people imprisoned themselves in those ghettos because politicians legalized drugs.
Страшную картину вы рисуете.
You are depicting
I don't know if we have time, George. I know you had another
picture.
question. Do you want to get in your last question, George?
No, actually, Danny Haifong asked it.
Oh, okay.
about
We'll leave it to Danny.
the,
Okay. Hey, Clayton, you may want to kill your video feed. I think that will help your audio feed.
Okay, let's see if we can
Try that.
do that. Let me see if I can do that. Okay, let's try that. I don't know if that helps at all.
No, it's still the feed's pretty lousy.
Maybe you can translate for me. I just wanted to ask about the economy, Larry. Which
Okay.
is the corrupt Western media has told us over the past few weeks that Russia is running out of oil and fuel.
Yes.
And that's it's a dire situation for the Russian economy.
Sure.
Can they speak to?
Yeah, I'll ask
Larry,
Maria
I
about
understood the question.
Yeah, so
Желаю,
yeah.
сам может ответить.
Yeah.
Я могу ответить на
I
этот
can
вопрос.
answer those questions.
Я могу.
I can, indeed.
Вы знаете, у
You know,
нас много вызовов.
We have lots of challenges, various challenges, and they were provoked from the outside. We are coping with that. We have coped with the information war, and will be able to cope with terrorism that has been unfolded by the Kiev regime against the Russian energy infrastructure. We'll cope with that. We've managed to cope with an attempt to block Russian energy cooperation with other countries. I can assure you, we are grateful to those who have disillusioned us. We managed to cope. We have not only learned to survive, but we've learned to live, and we've learned how to fight that evil, and we'll keep fighting. I can ask the question, do you understand the root causes of all those problems that are emerging? The root cause is generated by Western governments who are financing the terrorist regime. They're giving money to that regime. You know, several years may pass, a few more years will pass, and similar to bin Laden, who was trained and sponsored by the West, and it was the West who supplied weapons to bin Laden and provided him with opportunities and was promoting him. The same will happen to the Zelensky regime, and it will be acknowledged that the West made a mistake and that the monster overgrew its creator and turned into absolute evil. I'd like to remind you that Hitler was sponsored from the outside. No Hitler would be able to seize power in Germany in 1930s if not for the multi-million support, big money and political assistance he was getting from the outside. And therefore, it is not our global problem. It is a local problem that we are going to deal with, and will deal with it successfully. There are various solutions, and we'll resolve it. But I'd like to ask those who keep sponsoring Zelensky and his terrorist gang, how are you going to whitewash yourself? How can you pray to God to absolve your sins? How much are you going, for how long are you going to keep those people in a bloodbath? Look at Iraq, at Afghanistan, at Syria, Libya. Look at them. What do you think? If in Serbia, there was, if you rebuild a hotel that was bombed by NATO, and this will be the last destroyed building rebuilt, do you mean that Serbians would forget what the West had done to them? And, you know, there's no repentance. It will not be forgotten. Please tell everyone that these are problems that we'll deal with and cope
Could I
with.
just simply comment as far as the economic problems? I sort of wish that they had destroyed some refineries, because we would be be in these traffic jams in Moscow because the cars wouldn't be all over the road. So it's just, you know, the economy in Russia, it's an incredible place. And this desperation by the West to try to pretend that there are problems here when you have such, you know, an effective spokesperson like Maria.
Oh no, it is not because there's me, but this is because of Russian people. Our people are like that, and I'm not speaking on my own behalf. And when I say something, it is not only in my capacity at the foreign ministry, but I talk to different people, not only to my friends and acquaintances. My Russian colleagues know that I spend 2 or 3, I talk to students and workers 2 or 3 times a week. I am invited by them. It is not only some sort of a speech or a briefing or a presentation. It is usually a Q&A, and it is usually and always a lively discussion. I am telling you the things that people told me. I am trying to broadcast what our people think and how they live, you know, and that's it. And our people still love other peoples, other nations, and they're ready to be friends and to cooperate, no matter how much pain the Western machine has inflicted on us. And during the Biden time in the United States, and how much pain NATO has inflicted on us. Our people, Russian people, have not rejected or turned down friendship or cooperation, but they know what they are ready to fight till the end. They want to preserve our true values without conquering the whole world, but to have our truth asserted and defended, so that we are not called humanoids, that we are genderless creatures, that we are slaves. And, you know, we don't need all that. And we know what it may lead to when you do not respond to dehumanization.
Can I finally ask a
Maybe
question?
you have a question.
No, seriously. I think we have to take this to the next level. If this is the last question, I think we have to really go hardcore. Yeah. In an auspicious vein, to quote our Chinese friends, we talked about a lot of horrors around the world and horrors that were forced on Russia, as you know very well. You deal with it all the time. And especially this metaphysical void in Europe now, where they forgot the Renaissance, they forgot the Enlightenment, and they are plunging themselves in a suicide pit because of their leadership. But I want to talk about the auspicious possible future. And Russia and China are leading this future. Russia and China.
Just one small
Of course.
intervention. Do you know who has inspired European leaders? You have talked about that they have forgotten common sense, and there is an existential void. Do you know who their leaders are? I think it is the American liberal democracy, without any doubt. It is sponsoring them. It made them this way, and it led them. And please do not release the responsibility from those citizens of the United States that have been imposing that on Western Europe. I can give you proof. The United States did not impose sanctions on Russia, and they went to Europe and Brussels, and they began forcing Europeans to impose sanctions in 2014. Who was it? It was Biden. When he was the VP, there are his quotes. These are not deepfakes or fakes. He was proud that he made European leaders to adopt a consolidated decision against
You're
Russia,
absolutely right.
knowing that there would be a retaliation, a response. And unfortunately, I'm sorry, but I have to say that the guilt and the problem of Western Europe is that it has lost its sovereignty. But I'm not sure that the victims of violence are worse than rapists.
No, it's a compound, Ms. Zakharova. The orders come from the empire, but you implement the orders much easier if you have vassal elites who lost their sovereignty, as you just said. Absolutely correct. But it's all about the collective, fragmented, dissolving West and the what we call the Atlanticist elites. But let's try the auspicious part, right? BRICS came of age last year. The SCO came of age this year. BRICS came of age in Kazan, thanks to the large part of the extraordinary amount of work that Russia did last year. I spent 6 months in Russia last year, to a large extent to follow the preparations for Kazan. And I could see how much all of you worked to make it an enormous success. Just like the Chinese in Tianjin this year, same thing. And there was the SCO, another SCO summit yesterday here, right? So these are the two top vectors of the future. Two multilateral organizations, Global South, Eurasia, Eurasia, Global South. It's all interlocked. So it's not really a question, but I am appealing not only to your vast diplomatic knowledge, because you've been to all these meetings, of course, but your gut instinct as well. Do you think that on the BRICS table and on the SCO table, all these major actors and partners, do they understand the extent of the SMO, and if Russia, when Russia fulfills the targets, how this is going to turn the whole planet upside down? And the new protagonists are going to be them at the BRICS table and at the SCO table. Do you feel this consensus little by little being formed, a better understanding of Russia's background, reasons why to proceed with the SMO this way, and of course, the way to the inevitable victory? These people are smart. They know that Russia already won the war. It's a matter of when the war will finish. How do you compare exactly your professional trajectory looking at the BRICS and the SCO from the inside and your instincts? What are they telling you?
I'm afraid that this is going to be the shortest response to someone who has been waiting for my response for such a long time. As long as Washington is going to boss around and make orders to BRICS and Shanghai Organization member states, telling them what they have to buy and what they do not have to buy, we should not be thinking about any philosophical concepts, because everything has been done for us. Russia provides opportunities for equal cooperation, and they get an alternative of being bossed around. And this world order based on rules is something that is a world order based on shouts, cries, violence, blackmailings, and threats, based on endless violence and nipping people's will in the bud. And this is the philosophy of the future. Everyone chooses himself the kind of world he wants to live in. We want to live in peace, and we propose the format of communication that is being fostered inside BRICS and the Shanghai Organization, when all member states are equal, not only by law, but in their moral standards and their morality and culture-wise. When they have equal opportunities, of course, they will never be the same. We are all different. Humans are different, but there is a notion of equality before the law, of being equal, and that no one has the right to humiliate other people. And this is the world that we are proposing, and we are showing that it is possible. It is not a utopia. It would be a utopia to claim that all people will be the same, and we have to abandon our desires and national interests. This is a utopia. This is not what we are suggesting. We are proposing equality. We are proposing a world of opportunities. We are proposing a dialogue. We are proposing a preservation of international law, a dialogue, and multiple voices. You know, a chorus, when it is a choir, I have never, perhaps artificial intelligence will give us that a chance, such a chance, but we've never had a chorus or a choir with the same voices. We hear different voices in a choir. This is a fantastic effect of singing in chorus, and this is why we are saying that the future is with that chorus. When we'll sing in chorus, when there will be solo areas, and there will be a big team of participants, and how beautiful it will be. It will be challenging, it will be uneasy, but it will give a real positive and constructive result. Instead of one loudspeaker who will tell everyone, like in Orwell's book, who should go left, right, who should eat, who should sit, who should sit and keep silent. The Western world is trying to prove what is true for us. They are crying that you are not allowed to buy Russian crude, you are not allowed to buy Russian gas, you are not allowed to conduct trade with Russia. Everyone understands that this is a stance that will be taken not only with respect to Russia. We have the largest territory. We are a major country based on many indicators, and the West has this animal feeling that if they bring the strongest down, then the rest would have no opportunity to resist, you know. And I think that our resistance on the one hand, and our resistance by force, and on the other hand, our constructive proposals to cooperate based on normality rather than new normality, all that creates an effect, which means that the global majority is not selecting between the two evils, but the global majority begins to understand, based on actual examples, that you can make a conscious choice, and you can choose peace, cooperation, and interaction. The word friendship does not have anything bad. It is not an obsolete word. It is not a word from the previous year collection, but these are the words of the future, you know?
Thank you very much.
It seems to me that it seems to me that Danny had his second question. He has only asked one question.
Sure, Danny, do you want to go ahead? Do you have another question?
Oh, well, yes. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to ask another question. Right now, the mainstream media is saying in the United States that Russia is invading NATO airspace with drones, seeking expansion in Europe, and committing acts of sabotage against NATO countries like Poland. Perhaps you can give an American audience an idea of the actual role that Russia plays in the world and what interests guide it.
Да.
Yes, of course. I suggest that your audience should think about one thing. Sabotage. Is sabotage good or bad? If it is good, then it should not be any reason to worry. If it is bad, then they should ask their governments and their regimes why they've been sponsoring sabotage against our country. Once they decide whether it is good or bad, we'll be able to continue the discussion. We believe that it is bad. We believe that extremist activities, terrorist acts are inadmissible. And having gained experience in North Caucasus, we believe that international terrorism is absolute evil, and everyone has to fight against it. We believe it, and we demonstrate it by example. I believe that your audience is quite young. Your audience may be diverse, but your audience are likely to be 30, 35, or under 40, and they don't know what the Russian Northern Caucasus international terrorism problem was. I can remind you that there was a time when the UK and a number of European states were sponsoring insurgents like Dudaev, Basayev. They were terrorists like Zakharov. Zakharov still lives in the United Kingdom, and he is the best guest for the British establishment. And they were committing terrorist acts and sabotage acts. Do you know what kind of terrorist acts they committed? For example, you take a large apartment house which is 15 stories high or 10 stories high, and terrorists, insurgents who were sponsored by the West, they brought explosives, hexagon, and they blew up those houses, and dozens and hundreds of people died. And there was another act of sabotage, and when in Budyonnovsk, it is a Russian city in the same region in the Caucasus, terrorists sponsored by the West, similar to how they sponsor Zelensky. There was a hospital, a maternity hospital was taken hostage. What is a childbirth? It is a miracle. It is a complicated process that requires everything: supply of oxygen, supply of water, electricity and light and heating for the baby to be born healthy. Those terrorists took that maternity hospital hostage. Those terrorists had West-made weapons bought and provided bought from the West and provided by the West, and they began dictating their will to the government. Nobody in the West, whether in Down Street, in Brussels or Washington, has made a statement that act was actually inadmissible. Everyone was demanding that Russia made concessions to terrorists. This was the time when the West had to decide whether sabotage or terrorist acts were good or bad. You just need to decide once and for good. If your countries and the citizens of your countries choose leadership who sign off treaties on counter-terrorism, then they have to comply. By the way, the words international terrorism are no longer used in the international information space. No one is discussing international terrorism. In the year of 2010, there was no other topic. Everyone was discussing international terrorism. We kept hearing about international terrorists. But now this topic is no longer on the radar screen. I don't know know what those international United Nations officials are doing. I have not heard this word mentioned by US observers, but this topic is still relevant. Why is it blocked by Western mass media? Because they feel uncomfortable given that Zelensky is an international terrorist who is targeting civilian infrastructure. The definition of terrorism, though there is not a universally accepted definition, but all definitions of international terrorism say that these are violent acts against civilians and to intimidate them. And we have just, we were discussing those strikes against the Russian energy system. It is civilian infrastructure. How about Nord Streams? It was civilian infrastructure that was destroyed by Ukrainians. Did anyone say anything? I have not heard anything from Brussels, Washington, Ottawa, Washington, or any other states. Did anyone say that it was bad to blow up a pipeline, a gas pipeline? How many times were power grids mined by people in the name and on behalf of the Kiev regime? How many times were terrorist strikes against the Crimea bridge? Was it was there anyone who tried to rebuke Zelensky? I will not shake your hand if you keep doing it. Did someone, Berlin, Norway, Sweden, I don't know, Finland, did anyone summon diplomats when it was declared by the Western countries that they suspect Ukrainians of that sabotage act? And I'd like to remind you how Russian diplomats were sent back home, though they were not accused of any particular crime. You need to define the standard, or you have to admit that there are no standards. Why should you ask these questions when no one can give an answer to the question, what is your attitude to acts of sabotage? First of all, you need to give a definition. Our definition is that international terrorism is absolute evil. Sabotage is evil. You need to also define it on your part. And by the way, it is a message to the civil society. The civil society has to demand a response to this question. What are we sponsoring? What is our money spent on? If you are targeting oil pumps, if you are targeting gas stations, then we should think about it. We need to decide whether it's good or bad. If this money is spent to strike the Crimean bridge, you need to decide whether it's good or bad. If civilian infrastructure is targeted, you need to decide whether it's good or bad. But this is the essence of the post-truth world. I have to apologize that we're going to finish our discussion like this on this note, but in 1945 nuclear weapons were used for the first time, and it was the United States government against militarist Japan. There were atomic bombs used against two cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and there was no reason to do that because the Second World War was about to come to an end, and it was clear that it was absolutely obvious, but it was some kind of retribution for Pearl Harbor and for all the sufferings of American people inflicted by Japanese militarists. And it was a horrific act, a terrible act. We are ashamed. You know, as we sometimes say, they did it, but we are ashamed. What is happening? All that is erased from the minds of Americans and people in the world. First of all, they started erasing the idea that it was a retribution for Pearl Harbor. Then they erased the fact that it was a decision made by the U.S. government. The U.S. government has never apologized. They did not even say we are sorry. They did not express any compassion. What do we see? Events held in Japan. At those events, Japanese government said that those nuclear bombs were falling from the skies. It looks like aliens were actually bombing them, or they were just fell from the sky. And you know what double standards lead to. And the most horrible, terrible, and barbaric thing is that at those ceremonies, Japanese government officials draw parallels with referring to Russia. They fail to mention that it was an act committed by the United States government, but due to some unknown fact, they are saying that Russia should not threaten the world with nuclear weapons. Russia has never used nuclear weapons and is a good faith party to all international documents. This has a direct relation to your question. There should be no double standards. You should not erase the memory of history, and you have to define basic concepts. Once we define that a table is a table, that a chair is a chair, a microphone is a microphone, a TV set is a TV set, internet is internet, then we can reach an agreement. But if we manipulate standards, and now we are manipulating concepts, concepts are being manipulated, not by us. I understand what it will lead to. When Hitler was called the father of European democracy, almost the father of European democracy, it led to the Second World War, to genocide, to Holocaust, etc. I also have a question. May I go?
Well, I was just going to say, yesterday's international terrorist is today's honored guest at the White House.
As long as our colleagues are here with us, we'll say goodbye to Maria. It is an important statement. Let me say, in this country, I briefly mentioned it today, when we were fighting against international terrorism in the North Caucasus, on the one hand, we are fighters against terrorism, and at the same time we said that those who voluntarily reject any using arms, and if they acknowledged the laws of our state, if they comply with human norms and everything that was a part of our policy, we could have a dialogue with them. And this is what happened. And we are not ashamed of that. Ahmad Kadyrov is someone who was fighting on the other side, but he was strong enough to lead a large number of people to stop that bloodshed that was imposed on us, and to actually release our country from international terrorism. And his son is continuing this noble cause. And we sincerely believe that Ahmad Kadyrov is a hero of our country. Though we know what we began with, we know him as a hero. We esteem him as a hero, and will treat him this way all the time. And in this connection, I'd like to clarify it. It is crucial, and I believe that it was a great achievement of our President Vladimir Putin and of our people who managed to find a way out from this situation. And it was a very noble way out, most noble. And I always gave this example as an effective recipe for those who face terrorist challenges domestically. Those terrorists may have foreign roots or international roots or domestic roots. This was an example that Russia demonstrated to the whole world. And this is something that has to be part of the world history book. And as Thank you very much, Maria, for these colleagues. Please stay online because we'll have another guest who is General Apti Alaudinov, who leads the Ahmad Battalion, and it was the result of what Maria Zakharova has talked about. It was not only a peaceful settlement, but it was he is defending our motherland. Maria, thank you very much. Many thanks for your great